I'm going to kick us off with a question to John, if possible, and congratulations on the first ahead of schedule trial in cholangiocarcinoma, potentially, and obviously without giving away any of the early data from the study, you'll obviously be getting a lot of patients through who might already have had treatment with immunotherapy. So do you hope that we're going to learn a bit more about that sort of subset of patients, or generally patients that might then go on to targeted treatment in terms of how they've responded, do you think, or is there any potential for us to look at that in the later phases of the study?
So, thank you, Rachel. So, the question, I think, is, will we learn anything more about immunotherapy from ABC10? Probably, yes, because of all the extra science bits that we're adding onto it. So all patients will have not just the panel looking for those 4 genes, they'll have what we call whole exome sequencing, which is many more than 500 genes, and other experimental projects to give us the most information possible about these patients. And ultimately, it may be a particular blend of markers from the T cells. So in genomic analysis, you can tell what type of T cell you've got in your cancer from the genomic analysis, and maybe there is a blend somewhere there that benefits most of all from immunotherapy. So that's one idea. I'm sure it won't necessarily be quite that easy, but that's one way of doing it. Yeah.
So we don't have any roaming mics, so if people have any questions, please just come up to the mics on the floor.
I do have another question, otherwise, for Matt and John. So the molecular testing, I guess a lot of patients and doctors have the same question: what is the best timing? So when should doctors and patients ask for such a test?
I think, bluntly speaking, it makes sense to do the testing up front. I think that we're at a point now in cholangiocarcinoma where the diagnosis of cholangiocarcinoma, particularly in a patient who has advanced disease, isn't necessarily all that helpful. You really do need to know the molecular profile which underlies it. And therefore, it seems to me that you need to do that testing up front. Now, I think there are other advantages to doing that. From a pathologist's point of view, I think it's relatively easier as soon as you've made the diagnosis to reach for those molecular tests and get it triggered. But there are disadvantages there. Many of these patients will not necessarily need that molecular testing during their journey, and therefore you will generate work which is not required. And the problem there is that will you clog up the system with this testing from patients who don't need the results, therefore slowing down the testing for those patients who do need it? There's a difficult balance there, but I do think the balance lies in favor of doing it up front.
So how about you, John? Do you agree?
A bit, yeah. He's worried about his pathology department. I mean, my view, particularly from what we've done, is that you need the best test and the most information as early as possible. And it is so important to get the best test. I've got a slide somewhere. Sorry, my life is in slides, where a patient who in fact came from abroad had their operation done in their local town, and the laboratory on the high street, because that's how they do things on there, turned up one result, one FGFR2 fusion. They then came to me and they had one of these liquid blood tests, a Guardant test, and that test turned out 2 FGFR fusions, one of which the blood test wasn't good enough to identify, and a mutation. The same patient then had the tissue, the actual material, taken out of the patient and put into our North Thames genomic hub test. And that identified both the fusions and identified 2 further mutations in the FGFR mutation. So I cannot emphasize how important it is to get the best test done, as in my view, as early as possible.
And on top of that, I was just thinking, so we have no evidence about the timing of the test. And for guidelines and also for reimbursements, the evidence is usually the stuff which makes things happen. So do we have to wait for either the ABC10 study or some other study before we can force or ask to have these tests reimbursed? I'm talking not only the Great Britain, but all over the world. So what's your own opinion? Do we need evidence or a randomized controlled trial to prove the benefit of these tests?
I don't think you're going to have to wait that long.
Right. I guess if there are no questions from online, there is a question here from the audience. Please come to the microphone.
Please come to the mics.
Is it on?
Yes.
I'm Benjamin, I'm a patient. Less than a fifth of patients proceed to surgery. A lot of patients are wanting to stay alive long enough until the next magic therapy comes along. It's crystal ball gazing, but when do you think other therapies could have curative intent? Because at the moment, we only have the possibility of surgery and everyone else is just trying to get by on whatever wonderful therapies are coming through. But I think there's the hope that at some point there will be something else that isn't just surgery. Can you offer some hope?
I'm curious who will answer that question. That's a very difficult one. John, do you try?
Yeah. So I hope so. I really hope so. Small populations within the cholangiocarcinoma world are already there. So those people who are mismatch repair deficient have a very reasonable chance of being cured with immunotherapy alone. The more we learn about immunotherapy, the harder we're going to push that envelope and increase the number to people who aren't necessarily mismatch repair deficient, but have something else that we haven't learned how to measure yet. So I think that envelope is increasing the whole time. The other thing is, some of these targeted therapies work a lot better than chemotherapy, in terms of their shrinkage. So the shrinkage rates of some of these tablets that some people in the room are taking are probably 2 to 3 times that of standard chemotherapy, making his job significantly easier indeed. I've had several people who have gone on to those tablets, previously thought to be inoperable, go ahead to have surgery. So is there a simple target we're aiming for in the future? No, it's not going to be as easy as that. But little advances are being made the whole time, and occasionally a bit bigger than others. And so, I think there's definitely encouragement, and the amount of research that's going on to this is exponential. And I think that's that's really where the advance is going to come.
First, apologies. So the online questions have been dropped, but for technical reasons, we haven't been able to see them. But now we see a lot of them. They're mostly about molecular tests. So I think most of them have already been answered. There are two more questions here from the audience. I think you were first. No.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Barbara Zonder Hughes. I'm working as an HPV surgeon in Amsterdam UMC. I was wondering if you have any opinion about patients who have intrahepatic cholangiocarcinoma and were treated with immunotherapy, We had a patient who had a multifocal disease, which kind of disappeared, and I was wondering about which imaging methods you use, and are you willing to offer them surgery after, and what do you do with this kind of disappearing lesions? Do you have any experience with that? And MRI, yes or not?
Yeah, because I know I know guys in Holland a lot, and they're using also the pump as well for intrahepatic cholangiomas. We haven't traditionally done resections for multifocal disease, traditionally, I have to say. But if you take the analogy of colorectal liver metastases that disappear on chemotherapy, a lot of our data would suggest that if it's no longer visible on a diffusion-weighted MR, the chance of it coming back is very low compared to a CT scan. So I'm less worried about disappearing METs. The question is that if you can get an operation, I'm not talking about hilar cholangio here, but intrahepatics, if you can do this operation safely, do you push the boundaries if it's lesions in one lobe of the liver and things, you know? And if you look at HCC, it's a different paradigm because there's underlying liver disease, and we're assuming that each lesion is a new hepatoma rather than intrahepatic metastases. So I think if you had some form of stability, and whether that's with SACT or whether with a pump or something else, could you look at some form of liver-directed therapy? And in the future, I think the thing we haven't discussed here is things like ablation, which obviously we know from the Dutch studies that ablation is equivalent to an operation for metastatic colorectal cancer. It's for small lesions, and that might be an option that extends possibilities for patients who aren't fit enough for a resection. So I think those are the unanswered questions, but I wouldn't ever suggest that this is done without the remit of a trial, because I think it's unfair to give people or put people through the risks of an operation without really any strong evidence, and the challenge always will be someone will always say, okay, I'll do it, you know, and then it's the patient who ultimately suffers. So I think, yes, would love for you guys to do the clinical trial, and the UK would be part of it, but when the clinical trial on debulking of colorectal liver mets happened, it was negative, you know, so that's the challenge.
Thank you. Out of time questions, I would like to suggest that all remaining questions, please do not hesitate to approach whoever is here on the panel. I would like to thank the panel for answering the questions. And for the people online, please do not hesitate to re-post your question, because there are some other sessions where these questions will come back. Thank you, and we will have now a tea break, and we are back here at 3:40. 3:40. Thank you.
In the UK, almost 1 in 2 people will get cancer in their lifetime, making it one of the biggest health burdens faced by the society. Fortunately, the combination of science, new data, insights, and innovative technologies are paving the way for a new era when cancer outcomes can be redefined. At AstraZeneca, we have a bold ambition to harness this power and to one day eliminate cancer as a cause of death. To turn our ambition into reality, we need to deliver on the scientific promise of so many exciting developments in the cancer care space. Together, we can strive to one day eliminate cancer as a cause of death.